Maximilian tried to speak, but he could articulate nothing. He staggered, and supported himself against the wainscot. Then he pointed to the door. "Yes, yes, yes," continued the old man. Maximilian rushed up the little staircase, while Noirtier's eyes seemed to say, "Quicker, quicker." In a minute the young man darted through several rooms, till at length he reached Valentine's. There was no occasion to push the door, it was wide open. A sob was the only sound he heard. He saw as though in a mist, a black figure kneeling and buried in a confused mass of white drapery. A terrible fear transfixed him. It was then he heard a voice exclaim, "Valentine is dead." And another voice which, like an echo, repeated, "Dead, dead." Chapter 103. Maximilian. Villefort rose, half ashamed of being surprised in such a paroxysm of grief. The terrible office he had held for 25 years had succeeded in making him more or less than man. His glance, at first wandering, fixed itself upon Morel. "Who are you, sir," he asked, "that forget that this is not the manner to enter a house stricken with death?" "Go, sir, go." But Morel remained motionless, he could not detach his eyes from that disordered bed, and the pale corpse of the young girl who was lying on it. "Go! Do you hear?" said Villefort, while d'Avrigny advanced to lead Morel out. Maximilian stared for a moment at the corpse, gazed all around the room, then upon the two men. He opened his mouth to speak, but finding it impossible to give utterance to the innumerable ideas that occupied his brain, he went out, thrusting his hands through his hair in such a manner that Villefort and d'Avrigny, for a moment diverted from the engrossing topic, exchanged glances, which seemed to say, "He is mad." But in less than 5 minutes the staircase groaned beneath an extraordinary weight. Morel was seen carrying, with superhuman strength, the armchair containing Noirtier upstairs. When he reached the landing he placed the armchair on the floor and rapidly rolled it into Valentine's room. This could only have been accomplished by means of unnatural strength supplied by powerful excitement. But the most fearful spectacle was Noirtier being pushed towards the bed, his face expressing all his meaning, and his eyes supplying the want of every other faculty. That pale face and flaming glance appeared to Villefort like a frightful apparition. Each time he had been brought into contact with his father, something terrible had happened. "See what they have done!" cried Morel, with one hand leaning on the back of the chair, and the other extended towards Valentine. "See, my father, see." Villefort drew back and looked with astonishment on the young man, who, almost a stranger to him, called Noirtier his father. At this moment the whole soul of the old man seemed centered in his eyes, which became bloodshot, the veins of the throat swelled, his cheeks and temples became purple, as though he was struck with epilepsy. Nothing was wanting to complete this but the utterance of a cry. And the cry issued from his pores, if we may thus speak, a cry frightful in its silence. d'Avrigny rushed towards the old man and made him inhale a powerful restorative. "Sir," cried Morel, seizing the moist hand of the paralytic, "they ask me who I am, and what right I have to be here." "Oh, you know it, tell them, tell them." And the young man's voice was choked by sobs. As for the old man, his chest heaved with his panting respiration. One could have thought that he was undergoing the agonies preceding death. At length, happier than the young man, who sobbed without weeping, tears glistened in the eyes of Noirtier. "Tell them," said Morel in a hoarse voice, "tell them that I am her betrothed. Tell them she was my beloved, my noble girl, my only blessing in the world." "Tell them, oh, tell them, that corpse belongs to me." The young man, overwhelmed by the weight of his anguish, fell heavily on his knees before the bed, which his fingers grasped with convulsive energy. d'Avrigny, unable to bear the sight of this touching emotion, turned away, and Villefort, without seeking any further explanation, and attracted towards him by the irresistible magnetism which draws us towards those who have loved the people for whom we mourn, extended his hand towards the young man. But Morel saw nothing. He had grasped the hand of Valentine, and unable to weep vented his agony in groans as he bit the sheets. For some time nothing was heard in that chamber but sobs, exclamations, and prayers. At length Villefort, the most composed of all, spoke. "Sir," said he to Maximilian, "you say you loved Valentine, that you were betrothed to her." "I knew nothing of this engagement, of this love, yet I, her father, forgive you, for I see that your grief is real and deep, and besides my own sorrow is too great for anger to find a place in my heart." "But you see that the angel whom you hoped for has left this earth. She has nothing more to do with the adoration of men. Take a last farewell, sir, of her sad remains, take the hand you expected to possess once more within your own, and then separate yourself from her forever." Valentine now requires only the ministrations of the priest. "You are mistaken, sir," exclaimed Morel, raising himself on one knee, his heart pierced by a more acute pang than any he had yet felt. "You are mistaken. Valentine, dying as she has, not only requires a priest, but an avenger." De Villefort, send for the priest, I will be the avenger. "What do you mean, sir?" asked Villefort, trembling at the new idea inspired by the delirium of Morel. "I tell you, sir, that two persons exist in you. The Father has mourned sufficiently, now let the procureur fulfill his office." The eyes of Noirtier glistened, and d'Avrigny approached. "Gentlemen," said Morel, reading all that passed through the minds of the witnesses to the scene, "I know what I am saying, and you know as well as I do what I am about to say. Valentine has been assassinated." Villefort hung his head, d'Avrigny approached nearer, and Noirtier said yes with his eyes. "Now, sir," continued Morel, "in these days no one can disappear by violent means without some inquiries being made as to the cause of her disappearance, even were she not a young, beautiful, and adorable creature like Valentine. "Mr. Procureur," said Morel with increasing vehemence, "no mercy is allowed. I denounce the crime. It is your place to seek the assassin." The young man's implacable eyes interrogated Villefort, who, on his side, glanced from Noirtier to d'Avrigny. But instead of finding sympathy in the eyes of the doctor and his father, he only saw an expression as inflexible as that of Maximilian.